Introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Cynthia Lane, longtime Kansan, lifelong Kansan. Grew up in southeast Kansas and spent nearly 40 years in education, mostly in the public education sphere, and had the privilege of serving as superintendent of the Kansas City, Kansas School District for a little over 8 years.
Bill Nicely, also a longtime educator in and around the Kansas City area. I got my start in Lewisburg, Kansas as a high school science teacher, and then moved into administration over on the Missouri side. And then my last gig as superintendent was in Kearney, Missouri.
Welcome to TranScript, where we talk about trans issues in education.
I'm your host, Gene Johnson, former superintendent in the Shawnee Mission School District.
And I'm Brad Tennant, longtime math teacher in Kansas. And today on TranScript, we ask the simple question, how did we get here?
A simple question with complicated answers. Cindy and Bill, welcome and thanks for helping us kick off this podcast. Cindy, let's start off with you.
I like to look at this in the big context of how do we make all people feel like they have a place and they belong and that they're safe to explore who they are. As superintendent, I didn't understand the challenges that transgender children and teenagers were going through, certainly. But I have this driving, I guess you could call it a value or expectation that I learn by stepping into the circle with groups of people and trying to understand their experiences and how we can support you from all aspects academically and who you are as a human being. And so we formed early on when transgender became more and more evident in many of the schools in the district. We formed a team that was a care team built on the care team principles that you meet families where they are and you explore and you learn and provide training. And that training started with my executive team and the board. We sat and we had folks come in to talk to us about these issues so we could try to at least enter the door from a place of wanting to understand how we could support the young people. It's a journey, and it's an ever-evolving journey even today in the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, definitely a journey for sure. Bill, how about you?
You said it was a relatively simple question, but the answer is really, really complicated. So it's really about awareness. And I can think back as my time as a high school principal, which was quite some time ago, and hearing for the first time parents and their legal supports advocating for their children and their children's rights. And as educators, we for the first time were unaware of this category of student. We talk about the last 10 years, or we talk about the last 5 years with legislative issues, but educators often learn about new categories for students from an advocacy standpoint from parents and their advocates. In some ways, we can, I think, make a parallel to students that qualify for disabilities or have an individual education plan and the advocacy that has gone on there. There's nobody in public education that doesn't advocate for every kid, who wants the very best for every kid. But from that point forward, with regards to trans students, those issues became more pronounced and more public. And as those issues became more public, then school leaders and consequently classroom teachers were shining a spotlight on efforts to provide opportunities for those kids and reduce bullying and ensure that there weren't barriers. And that's really difficult to do. And it's particularly difficult to do when the population that you're seeking to aid is so not understood.
One of the things that was interesting for me was, based on my retirement in 2013, when I retired, there was not a lot of talk about transgender students or transgender people. And so our issues really focused on gay and lesbian students in our district. And you brought up bullying, which I think is a group that needed lots of support also. Now, Brad, you've been around education in the classroom for almost 20 years, and you've got a good history here of kind of what's going on in the district now compared maybe to when you started.
20 years ago was transgender rights or transgender students or transgender issues was not even on our radar. And so it is certainly something very recently. But I think, fortunately, we have a lot of tools that we use for other things that we are attempting to adapt to dealing with transgender students and making sure that they are accommodated and feel welcome and they're not bullied and all the positive things that we want for our kids.
Let's talk a little bit about where we go from here. What's going to happen in the years to come, in your opinions? Cindy, why don't you start off on that one?
Well, I don't have any crystal ball, but think about this is kind of on a pendulum, where when I was a kid, there were folks that were gay, lesbian, transgender, folks that had other labels attached to them in this space, and mostly in the shadows. And then we went through a period not that long ago where it seemed like we were learning from the youth, we the adults. We should really think about how we're treating this population, right, and be overt. And there was, legalizing gay marriage and all those kinds of things. So a lot of hope on the horizon. But that pendulum to me seems to be swinging back because we're fearful of what we don't truly understand. And we're in a period of, I think, where we should be really thoughtfully cautious about how we set policies and establish things that allow people to thrive. So where we're going, I think we're going to go through a lot of turbulence, and it'll take all of us to have the courage to step into the arena with individuals and stand up for their rights and try to help support them so they can be who they are. But I think it's going to be a rocky road because we're in a period where policies are being passed that are just, in my estimation, not just for this population, but can be very counterproductive to people feeling like they can reach their full potential and be who they are.
Well, it's certainly a rocky road in legislatures and in Congress. I read where there is, this year, there in the United States, there are 424 bills that are considered at this time regarding transgender students. That's a lot. Bill, what's your take on this?
I think what Cindy said is right. It is a time to be courageous. The timing for this podcast is really appropriate. Oftentimes, school districts lead the way. Like public education leads the way on issues. They're brought to light in public education. Students are advocated for in public education, and then awareness is raised one way or the other. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, and that awareness becomes public, and then the public forms an opinion about them. Who are the people in the public? Well, they're also educators in some case, but they're legislators as well, and they're school board members, and they're community members. So school leaders have a really difficult job navigating all of that. And I can recall a couple of my best school board members. I've had a lot. And a couple of the best was a president and a vice president. One was very conservative politically. One was very liberal politically. But what I found amazing about those two individuals is that regardless of their political beliefs, they always advocated for children. They may not have understood completely the issues, but they were always in favor of the overall well-being of students. And I think that's what we have to keep first and foremost in mind, is the overall well-being of students. And then if we have to, then we have to have those decisions informed. So we have to look at the statistics. We have to understand the significantly higher probability of homelessness for trans individuals. We have to look at the significantly higher probability or percentages of suicide ideation for trans students. It's difficult, and it's not for those students. Life is more difficult, and so as educators and as policymakers, it behooves us to really think about those individuals and what we can do for their overall well-being, and not necessarily what we can do for how we as a collective perceive an issue.
So may I ask a question? I
Sure.
think you make some great points, Bill, as you were talking. What's the balance then between advocating for the individual and also understanding the impact on the group? So I've thought a lot about this issue of legislation because Kansas has passed some restrictions. And I at first really wanted to step back and be offended by what was passed. But as I've thought about the intention, it may not be the best written law, but the intention is to protect the rights of individuals that were hard-fought female athletes in particular, that they have a fair playing field to compete on. And so I tried to put that in the bigger context of what we do when we set regulations of participation, who can participate, who's eligible, who qualifies. So I'm trying to think about this policy issue. What's the balance there between having a policy that in most cases, I think in Kansas was at least well-intended to make sure that female athletes had level playing field with each other. What's the balance of that? And then being not disregarding an individual's rights to feel like they belong and they too can have a shot at participation. So I am grappling with that.
But as
issue.
you know, that's the age-old struggle of school policymakers, whether at the local level, in the respective school districts, or at the state level. That's the age-old struggle. What's important to think, to keep in mind, I think, is that historically, we have to have a trust in our local systems to work. We're neighbors with our educators, our teachers. They live next door to us. They live down the street. Our school administrators. We go into the grocery store and we see who they are. There should be a level of trust there that they're doing the best they can in every situation. And here's why I say that. Because if you walk into any particular school district, there will be this sort of wide array of students, whether it's race or gender, LGBTQ, disability, exceptionality, nationality. And they, by and large, go about their day in relative harmony, amazingly so. And school people care for them and educate them. And when these issues arise, or concerns, or advocacy, or whatever we want to call it, the schools tend to solve the problems in a relatively good way. There's not a lot of controversy coming from inside the school out. It's the other way around. It's outside the school in.
From those who may not fully understand how the school is balancing the needs of the individual with the needs of the school as a whole. I think that's
we
insightful.
hope that our schools are a little bit of an oasis. I remember that some issue that was controversial that people were surprised that they weren't protesting at the school. And I said, within the school, everything is fine. Maybe from the outside, it looks different. One of the things that, one of the early issues with transgender students was bathroom usage. And the first attempt at solving that was we would get an email from the school nurse, and they would say, so-and-so can come to the nurse's room and use the bathroom there. Then I think most of the schools came up with some type of bathroom that was accessible for transgendered students. Now, at least at the high school level, and I think it is complete in Shawnee Mission, now we have one bathroom that's been converted to privacy bathrooms. So they're individual stalls instead of the traditional bathroom. And I grew up on the West Coast. When I go home to Seattle, those are the only kind of bathrooms I ever see. So in some ways, we're kind of catching up with places that have been dealing with issues with this. But these privacy bathrooms helped. And it's not just a benefit to our transgender students. I have students that prefer this another avenue in their day. So I'm thankful that we are still kind of an oasis, and we're trying to solve things from within. And I'd just like to see if we can get that expanded beyond the schools.
Yeah, there's a lot of transgender issues that need to be addressed, but I think the bathroom issue was obviously one of the first ones. I mean, people were just worried about, where's my child going to go to the bathroom, and I can say I can't speak for any other school districts, but I do know that Shawnee Mission did a good job of dealing with that. But it costs a lot of money. I mean, to redo the plumbing, do the whole thing. I mean, it was expensive. And I've had, people say to me, I know they're doing that, but it sure did cost a lot of money. Well, I think it caused many less issues like you said, it's the norm a lot of places, but it's
absolutely.
not.
I mean, anytime we're spending money in the schools, I mean, think when we went to the one-to-one technology initiative and invested $22 million on MacBooks. Now, initially that was like, that's a lot of money, but now, wow, I wish other districts I wish we were like China, especially, during COVID. We all had our MacBooks. We were ready to roll.
Mm-hmm.
Often is the case where school administrators are approached, certainly I was, by individuals within the community asking, can you believe this is happening? What are you doing with these students, that we call trans students? And the answer is always the same. We've been dealing with this for decades, and we've been dealing with it effectively, providing and advocating for all kids. And it's just now getting to the community, and it's just now brought to light within the legislature. And that light, I think, is one that is oriented around policy, but could do better to also focus on the facts and provide information that is associated with that policy. Oftentimes we get the policy, but we don't really hear about the background information, and maybe that's on schools and municipalities and state agencies to do a better job of.
Yeah.
That's why in KCK it was important to get the board to the table to do learning and training and trying to understand, because if you come to some level of common understanding, then you know what decisions need to be made for the better of the whole. So KCK School District also transformed all their facilities, just quietly did it to provide safe spaces, and anyone could choose to use those spaces. So it's that learning piece. If we can slow down enough to try to educate each other and come to understanding, I think that's when we make the best decisions.
Bill, you brought up a really good point when you talked about the responsibility of school boards and how they need to fit with the goals and objectives of school districts. And I may be speaking out of turn here, which isn't the first time in my life. It's going to take a lot of support of everybody in the school district to take care of the transgender issues and other major issues that occur. When their boards aren't together, and we've all been probably exposed to that to a degree, not totally, but it's that makes a huge difference.
It does. So I'm thinking about societal norms and different groups within our society and beliefs. Oftentimes, those are couched in religious beliefs, and so in many ways, communities and school districts are melting pots with regard to beliefs. And so the policymakers and educators have the difficulty of trying to navigate that. And so if we use the school board example, here's this multi-member, 7-member school board with this wide variety of individuals that are elected to do one job. And that job is largely associated with policy around public education in their school district. And those individuals have wide variety of beliefs. Some of them are very conservative. Some of them that don't allow for an understanding or an acceptance. I'll just say that of the transgender ideology. And in fact, ideology is probably the wrong word to use. But hopefully the point's there somewhere. And so the school leader, the superintendent, has to really keep that focus on what's best for all kids and in navigating those situations. And so those school board members that are really start out, many of us have had lots and lots of school board members, and they start out, I worried too much. I lost too many hours of sleep. Let me just say that around election time. But the fact of the matter is that in almost all of the cases, whether you were happy that a school board member got elected or an individual, you were unhappy, once they got into that chair and into that role and learned from the other board members around them, they really began to focus on what's best for students. They didn't always agree. They certainly rarely changed their point of view or ideology, especially if those beliefs are religious, founded in religion. One wouldn't expect them to, but they begin to understand what it means to run a school district and the plight of students. Because there's nobody, school board members or any other adult individual, who doesn't understand what bullying's all about and what biases are all about and the damages that those can cause.
Yeah. I think we're about ready to wrap up. And I certainly want to thank you, Cynthia Lane, and Bill, you, and so for being here today. I think we've had a really good conversation. So, Brad, any final thoughts here?
We've covered a lot of ground here today. I think that's what we expected. Gene and I are going to ponder this for a while, and we'll be back in a minute to talk about what we learned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Gene, what did we learn on this episode of TranScript?
Well, one thing we've learned is that this is a very complicated issue, and it's an issue that has a wide range of opinions from a wide range of people.
Well, and I was thankful to hear from both Bill and Cindy that there is some general infrastructure or foundation for dealing with marginalized populations within our school districts.
What's the most complicated issue that we've been facing in this whole arena that we're talking about? I think transgender is a more complicated issue in that the accommodations that we need to make are greater. It's just seems to be an issue that is the support for transgender students. If we think it's there with everybody and everybody in the school district thinks that, everything you're doing with transgender students are the right things to do. They don't think so. They think we shouldn't be doing anything with them.
What Bill had said is that often the solutions can be initiated within schools. I feel like it puts a little pressure on us, but I feel like at least we have the resources to help with some of those solutions. That there are enough students that are open to making a difference, to helping everybody, and we've just added another group of kids that we want to be as part of our everybody that we're helping out.
When you've got a bunch of students that say, we think we need to support kids that are having issues. They may be gay, they may be lesbians, they may be loners, you name it, those kids are out there. And all you have to do is just walk around in the lunchroom and you figure out who the kids are that really don't have friends. They may be, just a myriad of issues with kids. And I think that we've grown in that area of support.
Well, certainly when you and I were in high school, there were not many resources for marginalized students. We were lucky that everybody was fed. That was probably the first step, is that we had, the idea of a free or reduced lunch for folks that couldn't afford to eat regularly was a big accommodation. And that we've seen, such growth. It's been a while since you and I were in high school, but I think we have at least embraced the attempt at making some changes.
But as far as our work with transgender students in schools, I see that as a really, really tough challenge, and you just have to get your feet wet on it and go for it. And when I say go for it, it's the staff has to be supportive. When I hear situations, and I think you've experienced this, where some staff members don't want to use pronouns with their students, that's going to be something that we have to overcome. And that may be a small thing, but I don't know. Is it a small thing or a big thing?
Oh, no, I mean, we've even seen research about teachers that don't want to pronounce a difficult to pronounce name, and it's a form of bullying. Is
Yeah.
it, can't I just call you Bob? Like, no, that's not my name. And that's, I suspect that down the road, in the beginning of the school year, we have the standard training things about bullying and, all the little videos that we very carefully watch every year, and that I suspect that issues about transgender students and pronoun usage and things like that should be part of that training. And that's this episode of TranScript. TranScript is produced by Sam Zeff and is part of the Archiver series of podcasts.
Make sure you subscribe to Archiver wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Gene Johnson.
And I'm Brad Tennant, and we'll see you on the next TranScript.